Hi there, welcome to an evening broadcast from the Indycar. This evening I'm in Partick and I'm making a broadcast just simply because something occurred to me while I was working this afternoon. One of the things that's been on the news, or will be in the news tonight, is the fact that the British government has to seek the consent of both the Northern Ireland, the Welsh and also the Scottish governments for the European Union withdrawal bill. Now that means that the British government, before it can actually enact the so-called repeal bill, has to get the consent of a majority in the houses of Holyrood, at the Welsh Assembly as well, and also at Stormont in Northern Ireland. Now, it occurred to me, and it might have occurred to other people, that at the moment the Scottish government is needing to get a Section 30 order from the British government in order for us to hold our independence referendum whenever we choose to do it. Now, it's going to be extremely difficult for the Tories to progress with the so-called repeal bill unless they can get the consent of the three devolved parliaments. Now, it's not going to stop them completely, but it is going to throw a gigantic spanner into the works of Brexit and hold things up dramatically and cause a constitutional crisis because the three smaller Celtic nations disagree with the Brexit deal and are preventing it. If even one of them were to withhold its own parliamentary consent for the bill, it would tie the whole process up in a cross-party international crisis between London and Edinburgh, and also in Wales as well, if Carbon Jones was to take issue with the Brexit repeal bill. So it seems to me it's a perfect opportunity for the Scottish government to do a little bit of bargaining. Now, if the Tories want to have a nice, smooth Brexit, then all they really need to do is to say to Nicola Sturgeon, OK, we need to get your consent so that we can enact the repeal bill. What is it going to take for us to get you to agree to that? And if the SNP were to say, well, quite simply this, if you were to give us our Section 30 order right now with no strings attached to it so that we can have a referendum at a time when we want to do it and when we think the people of Scotland deserve to have a choice between Brexit and a different future, then we could have a deal. The Brexit repeal bill could go ahead, and because it could go ahead, Scotland's referendum could also go ahead, because we know the repeal bill is going to cause a problem which might close down Holyrood. And if the repeal bill goes ahead, Holyrood's almost certain to close, and that is bound to cause uproar, and people will want a vote on whether or not to stay in the United Kingdom. So it seems absolutely, completely and utterly logical to me that the SNP should really say to Mrs May, look, if you want to get our approval for your Brexit bill, you have to give us the Section 30 order now, and we can make a joint announcement that we've agreed that we will get the Section 30 order from you, and you will get the consent of the SNP government to proceed with Brexit. Now that takes the brakes off for both governments to proceed with both of their plans simultaneously. And then it's really just a race to the finish line. Who can get organised first? If the Tories win the race and they manage to get the repeal bill through before there's a referendum, then we've lost. If we get a referendum in before the repeal bill is enacted, then we have a chance to win. But it seems to me that nothing is really going to move unless the Scottish government takes some action here, because there is an old saying that whoever takes action first in any situation controls the outcome of the situation. And if we want the British government to do something and to make progress and make things happen, we need to do the same thing ourselves. And it seems to me that that might be the ideal time for us to make some demands of our own. If they want our consent, then we should ask for something in return, and that something should be the Section 30 order with no strings attached to it. Because a lot of people have been complaining that the election that we have, last election we had, is controlled. The election process is a reserved matter. And one or two people I know who have been making inquiries about introducing blockchain have discovered that when they asked the SNP about blockchain, they've been referred to the Electoral Commission. When they asked the Electoral Commission about blockchain, the Electoral Commission have referred them to Parliament. They've referred them to Westminster because they have to get consent from the Commission in Westminster in order to change anything to do with the electoral system in the UK, and that includes Scotland, incidentally. So it might not be that we can get a blockchain system in place in time for the referendum, but if we can't, then we can simply ask for an improvement to the existing system. So we still have ballot boxes, we still vote in the usual way for a referendum, but this time it must be monitored properly, and we must have counts inside the actual polling stations, so that there is no chance that any of the ballot boxes can go missing, be switched, or have votes stuffed into them or taken out of them, or be tampered with in any way. And then in that way we can be sure that whatever the result of our next independence referendum is, we will at least have confidence that it was fair, and that if we won it fair and square. If we lost it fair and square. But at least that time, this one time, we will know that it has not been tampered with, and there should be no postal votes involved in this either. So lots of things going on at the moment. The whole situation is moving very fast, but like I said at the beginning of this broadcast, why don't we push for the Section 30 order in exchange for giving Holyrood's parliamentary consent to the European withdrawal bill? That way the brakes will be taken off the whole process, we'll move forwards, and we'll be able to have a referendum, and Brexit will be able to do its thing. And then everybody will be happy, because otherwise at the moment we're all just going to be hanging around getting bored, frustrated and fed up, and the whole process of Brexit is going to drag on forever. Anyway, that was my thought today, and that was the reason for this broadcast tonight. But two things to take away from this tonight is that we could get Section 30 order in exchange for Scottish parliamentary consent on the EU exit bill, and we have a problem with the Electoral Commission because they have kicked the can down the street and are now making us go to the British government to ask their permission to use blockchain as a voting system. It might be that they'll agree to it, but why is it a reserved matter when it's clearly a Scottish vote that we're wanting to have, and we should be able to organise that ourselves? The Electoral Commission in Scotland should have no problem with the voting system as long as it's fair for both sides. Anyway, that's it. All I've got to say for this evening. Have a pleasant evening. I'll talk to you again tomorrow when Indycar will be back at a more normal sort of time of the day. Goodbye for now.